They say it, and it's true that everything is getting faster. You're not getting any younger, and time is the single resource that you can never get back or get any more of. So why walk into your local comic shop blind when you can go in laser focused on the best books on the shelf?
Hi everybody, and welcome to Minute to Skim It. Yeah!
Spend 1 hour with Miss Jen and Bean, and they'll give you rapid-fire reviews of all the new comics hitting stores. Spend less time shopping and more time reading.
This is Provenance of Secrets.
This is The Heathens. I read Wolverine number 17.
Minute to Skim It, every Tuesday at 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific, on The Experience, Comic Culture and Sales.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Dan Wickline Show. Today is International Women's Day. Yes, so in honor of International Women's Day, I was thinking what we could talk about today is the two big superhero movies that came out last year that featured, led by female characters. We'll talk about Wonder Woman 1984 and Black Widow. Now, sitting here realizing that as the thing was rolling, that I probably should have grabbed my Black Widow and my Wonder Woman figure from the shelf back over there and have them up here, which I normally do when I have a show and I've got an appropriate hot toy, but didn't think of it until the last minute, and my bad. But you can see Wonder Woman right up there. And then Black Widow is there. Yeah. So they're there. Yeah. Actually, Black Widow's probably over here. That's probably Scarlet Witch over there. That's behind Captain Marvel's Black Widow. But yeah, I thought for International Women's Day, we should do, and these two characters happen to be international women, I mean, Black Widow, born in Russia, raised in Ohio, traveled back and forth. Diana Prince, raised on Themyscira, came to the war in London, lived in America. I mean, there's definitely international. So we're going to talk about them today. And also the whole idea of women leading films, women leading superhero films, and why there's always this negative connotation. And it's an undeserved negative connotation. There's always this expectation that they're not going to be good. And I don't mean in the general populace. I mean that it becomes this vocal diatribe from people putting down the movie. And normally it's people who don't even care about the movie. They don't want to see the movie. It's because they don't want female heroes. And that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. The first Wonder Woman movie may be one of the best superhero movies ever made. It's got some flaws. Every superhero movie has flaws. Every movie has flaws. But it is probably one of the best ones ever made. Hands down. Captain Marvel movie. Captain Marvel movie was very enjoyable. It gets a lot of knock. It's, I don't even want to get into the complaints about it because they're complaints that don't make sense. They're complaining about how friendly the character is. You have a character who has no memory of who she is. She's trying to figure out what's going on. She's been lied to for years. She's trying to put her life back together. Just comes back to comes to Earth, find out she's coming back to Earth. Yeah, she's not going to be, oh, hey, how you doing? And we get those kind of things. And the part of the problem is that there have been some really bad female-led superhero movies. The Catwoman movie with Halle Berry. That was a really bad movie. And that didn't have to do with the fact that it was a Halle Berry movie, or that it was a Catwoman movie, or that it was a female-led superhero movie. It was just a bad movie, and so was Elektra. Elektra was a bad movie. And again, it's not because they're females. They were just bad movies. But the more recent ones we've had, Captain Marvel, Wonder Woman 1984, and Black Widow, have been, with one exception, good movies. And even that one exception, it was some of the things in the movie that didn't make sense. It's not the movie itself. Now, I'm going to split this up here. We're going to talk about Wonder Woman 1984 first, and then we'll talk about Black Widow after the break. So, getting into 1984, there was some great things coming out of the Wonder Woman movie. The first Wonder Woman movie, Patty Jenkins directed, Gal Gadot, or Gadot, Gadot. I've heard multiple pronunciations for her name. I always say Gal Gadot, but I think it's Gadot. Gadot? I don't know. But I go with Waiting for Godot, Gal Gadot. So she was great. Chris Pine was great. Again, it was a well-directed, well-written movie, and it had a really nice tone to it. It was set in the war. It wasn't about romance yes, there was a love story between Steve Trevor and Diana Prince, but it wasn't her driving factor. Her driving factor was she was going by what she was destined to do. She was supposed to be the king. She was supposed to, the Amazons were there to take out Ares. That was their job. And she was following the honor of her family and her tribe, her people. And that was her motivation. The love story with Steve Trevor was a side note. It was part of the story. It was an important part of the story, but it wasn't her main motivation. And it worked great. The battle scenes, the fish out of the water scenes, all of that stuff worked really well. And Chris Pine did a good job of playing the second fiddle. And it flipped it, because there wasn't a whole lot of difference between some of the male-led superhero movies, in the sense that the motivations were similar, the action was good. It was just a really good movie. And the box office reflects that. The award, just down the line, just about everybody I know loved the Wonder Woman movie. It had, good origin history. It had good action, good acting. Just down the line, Gal Gadot was amazing as Wonder Woman. Hippolyta and all the other characters that were brought in, all really good stuff. So when the sequel was announced, everybody got excited. This was going to be awesome. And it was Patty Jenkins back. It was Gal Gadot. They were going to find a way to bring Chris Pine back. And they cast Kristen Wiig as Cheetah. And all of that seemed to be really good, except for maybe the Chris Pine thing. Because when you find some way to bring somebody back to life, it doesn't always work. And that was part one of two major problems with this film. And this is probably the weakest of the four that I talked about. The Captain Marvel, the Wonder Woman, stuff like that. Because there were some serious issues with the story. And part of the thing was, Patty Jenkins decided she wanted to do an 80s movie. Now, the fact that it's Wonder Woman 1984 clearly sets it in the 80s, sets us around the time of tie-dye, of day-glow outfits and big shoulder pads and breakdancing and all of the things that were popular in 1984. And it wasn't necessary for the story. When you name a thing 1984, there's a couple problems with that. One is there needed to be something that made it specific for that year, because there was nothing in that movie that said it couldn't have been 1983, 87, any of that. The fact she picked 1984 made it seem like it had to be specific to that year, and it wasn't. The other problem you have when you title something 1984 is that 1984 is famous for another reason. The George Orwell book. I mean, amazingly popular book that about government control and just Big Brother is watching, all of the things that, 1984 has been famous for, well, it was written in 1948. So 72 years, that movie, the definition of 1984, when you hear 1984, you think of Orwellian things, thought police, sex crimes, just down the line. All of that. It's just, there's a connotation to 1984. So when you brand your movie Wonder Woman 1984, it seems like it needed to have something to do with that. Now, as much as, the Dream Stone and all of that stuff, it really didn't connect to that. They could have gone a very different direction. They could have gone with a different villain. They could have gone with Dr. Psycho and make him control people's minds. Or they could have gone with a repressive government theme. I mean, if you're going to do 1984, but Jenkins wanted to do an 80s movie with some of the 80s tropes. And that is where things started getting dicey. One of the tropes she wanted to go with was the body switch trope. And we got that in movies like Big and, Freaky Friday and, where you basically have a little kid go into an adult's body or swapping of bodies, stuff like that. There was an innocence to the 80s that made those things work, because otherwise, if you think about the movie Big, you have a little boy or a teen, not even a teen boy in an adult's body who ends up having sex with somebody. It's kind of creepy when you step back at it. And that's what happened here. Is for some reason Patty Jenkins felt that she had to bring Chris Pine back. And if she was going to do that or felt that was necessary, then she shouldn't have killed him in the first place. But that would also have been an issue because, this is World War, I want to say it was World War I, wasn't it? The first movie? Was it World War II or World War I? I don't remember now. I gotta admit, World Wars kind of blend to me. But I think it was either way. Chris Pine's character would be very old now in 1980s. It would have been at best 40 some odd, so he would have been in the 70s if it was World War II. And if it was World War I, he'd probably be dead. World War I. Okay, thank you. It was World War I, so he'd probably be dead by now anyway. So to bring his character back, they had to find a unique way. And they did this Dreamstone, cat's paw, careful what you, or monkey's paw, careful what you wish for thing, and brought him back. And in doing so, gave us this creepy thing of this poor guy is getting his body hijacked. His whole life is being hijacked. And is he just like gone? Is he in the back watching it through his mind? I mean, we never really understand that, explain it. And it's not like he suddenly became Steve Trevor. He was Steve Trevor in this other guy's body. So this other guy was still there. That's what other people were seeing. Diana just kind of kind of glossed over it. And in her mind, she started seeing Steve Trevor, or at least that's how it was portrayed in the film. And that was really strange, And they didn't have to do that. If they wanted to do another Diana and Steve story, they could have just moved it up a few years, but they kept it a period piece. I don't know why. They did this with Captain America too. They felt like, well, we're going to do the period piece for the origin, and then we'll jump ahead. Why? Why not focus on the period piece, and then we could have the future version of him in the Avengers, or the future version of her in the Justice League, but still spend time with Etta Candy and the rest of the losers, or whatever that group was called. I think they were called the Losers. And Steve Trevor, they could have stuck with post-war. They could have done a lot of things. But they decided to move it up. And that was the thing, is that's where it got dicey, is that they really wanted to go to 1984. Now, there was some good stuff in that movie. There was good acting in the movie, but the story itself had a lot of problems. And they give us a way the Dreamstone works early on in the movie, and it's pretty straightforward. And we see it and demonstrated by the coworker who touches the stone and says, "I wish I had a cup of coffee." And then suddenly somebody walks in with an extra cup of coffee and gives it to him. Then as he's walking away, he drinks it and he burns his mouth. And that was to show the relevance of how that worked. You got something, but you had to pay a price. There was a balance to it. And the bigger thing you got, the bigger price. But it seemed very random as well. And the thing is that there was no real laws to it or rules to it with how random it was. So something like, Diana wishes Steve would come back, and she starts losing her powers. That seems like a big thing. And then when Kristen Wiig's character Priscilla wishes that she was more like Diana, she started gaining those powers. So it almost seemed like she was draining those powers, but there were two separate wishes. So again, there was a lot of confusion in the movie, which it shouldn't have been. They did such a good job with the first movie that when the second movie came along and the whole tone of the movie switched, the whole direction of the movie, suddenly this movie became about Diana and her love life, which you wouldn't do for a male-led character. Spider-Man No Way Home. Yeah, his relationship with MJ was important. But it wasn't the defining factor of the movie. It wasn't, he didn't make bad choices because of that. He made choices to fix things. She made choices for love and then still tried to do, as her powers failed, tried to do the right thing. But, she eventually had to make the decision to let Steve go. Now, Diana from the oh, wait, hang on. Let's see. Kyle says the writing felt slapdash in a way it felt like Spider-Man 3, where things were forced in rather than letting it be what it was supposed to be. I felt like they tried to service too many masters on this one. And maybe Spider-Man 3 had that same problem. What they did with here was they wanted to tell a romance story, but they wanted it in the 80s, and they wanted to use the 80s tropes. And then they turned Maxwell Lord into kind of an 80s trope as well. A little bit Donald Trump, a little bit what was that guy that used to have the seminars and he would sit on the back of the boat and talk about how, he could help you become rich and all that. That kind of the grifter snake oil salesman type. No, not Matthew Lesko. Will you stop with Matthew Lesko? Cal's obsessed with Matthew Lesko. This was an Asian guy that used to sit on the boat with a bunch of women in bikinis. The reason, I think the reason is that they were so focused on doing an 80s movie and using the 80s tropes that it's not Robin Leach. Oh, I'm sorry, no, not Robin Leach. This was an Asian guy. He was popular. He was a lot of late night things. He would do these commercials and he would talk about, I think it was real estate or something, and how you could make money too and stuff like that. So, I don't know, just kind of slipped my mind. I had the name earlier. Anyway, the key that I saw was that they were so focused on doing this be careful what you wish for theme, and that the plot kind of fell apart. And now maybe they filmed, maybe the script was tighter and then they, shifted it around a bit to accommodate I don't think the pandemic had started when they were filming. It felt very 80s. Yeah. Max Lord was a horrible villain in the thing. Pedro Pascal did a good job playing the character he was asked to play, but he wasn't a good version of Max Lord. Max Lord is a great villain in the comics, and they also tried to use him in the first season of Supergirl, and they didn't do a good job of it there either. And I don't think they understand the character. Again, I think Max is a bit narcissistic, and they don't seem to really get that. Yeah, Ken, I agree. They should have just had the cheetah as the villain, and they could have done a lot with that. There's a lot of things they could have done. I think they were so focused on doing, like I said, an 80s style movie. Patty Jenkins, and no disrespect to her, but it feels sometimes like she has got a certain types of movies she wants to make. Or maybe the guys at Warner said, okay, well, the first movie was kind of Captain America. Let's make the second movie kind of Spider-Man, because Spider-Man was that John Hughes style of, the latest Spider-Man movies are kind of that John Hughes style of movie telling, from Pretty in Pink and stuff like that. At least the first one was. So maybe that's what they were doing, trying to go to the 80s in that way, but it really didn't work. And a lot of really good characters were wasted and a lot of really good performances, because I think Kristen Wiig was doing a good job. I think I even liked the design on the cheetah's out when she goes full cheetah. That wasn't that bad. Normally they get one of those and it's like, what are you doing? That actually looked okay. Some of the fight scenes were good, but there was a lot of things that were brought in that didn't pay off. Like suddenly she could fly, and she's never used flying in any of the Justice League movies or the stuff that are set in the future. So it just really does come down to be kind of this mess of a movie, which is a shame with just how good the first movie was. Now, you could pick through scenes and there is some good stuff. I thought Chris Pine was really good in his portrayal. Yeah. Silver Swan, there was Giganta, Dr. Psycho. There's a lot of great Wonder Woman villains they could have used. Or they, like I said, they could have gone with the whole, since they were set it in 1984, the very Orwellian type story. And they could have used Max Lord for that. I mean, that's the thing. Max Lord was Orwellian in the comics. He took over Brother Eye and all this other stuff and was watching people. They could have gone that route. And instead they made him, a snake oil salesman. And the Dream Stone instead of my one complaint with the first Wonder Woman movie was the ending. I would like to have seen more realistic fighting between Wonder Woman and Ares. Instead, they went to this big CGI type battle, and they didn't need to. It would have been better to see them fight it. And they did the type of thing here. The potential was there, the characters were there, but they were trying to, Ken, you're right. Everything felt they were forcing it too hard. And that really is what they were doing. They really had this type of movie they wanted to do, and they tried to fit Wonder Woman into it. And a lot of things took her out of character. The whole idea that she would accept Steve taking over somebody else's body, I can't see her doing that. That's not Wonder Woman. She would tell Steve, it's great to see you. I miss you, da-da-da. You need to leave. You can't be that's a person that you're taking over. That's a life you're taking over. I can't see her accepting that. And even with the idea that she needed to stop it, the whole idea that this was happening, would she then take that innocent person in and do all these things that put them in danger? And just the continuity problem of how would Steve Trevor know how to fly a jet? He was a pilot in World War I. How would he even know how to start a jet or what a jet is? It seems like that would be a very different, like the difference between, riding a skateboard and driving a car. It just feels very different. So, all right. So, first half of the show, talking about Wonder Woman 1984. Gal Gadot is a great Wonder Woman. Patty Jenkins is a good director. I think the movie just got away from them and they made some major mistakes. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about the other big female-led superhero movie from last year, Black Widow. Be right back.
This is The Experience.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hey there. Hi there. Ho there. You're as welcome as can be.
Hi, I'm Nancy McCann. Welcome to Friday Night Live on The Experience.
Welcome, everybody. It's Fat Jack's Comic Crib. Brendan, Al, Jason, hanging out.
There I am.
Welcome back to Kicking It with Henry, folks. I am your host, Henry Copeland. It's great to be here with you guys.
So we are going to talk about books that are in stores this week.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Mishmash.
Hello, and welcome to the Black Comics Universe, presented by Peep Game Comics.
And you gotta love it that the first people in a minute to skim it are creators.
Up, everybody! Welcome to another Wednesday Warriors. My name is Joey Galvez, and this is my pal Ambrosia.
Hey, everybody! Welcome to Space Cadet.
Hey!
What's up?
Welcome, everyone, for another episode of I Must Ask You a Question.
Hi, everybody, welcome to Nerd News Now.
Hey, this is Rex. Welcome to Comic Collectibles.
Hey, hello, all you happy people. Welcome to the Dan Wickline Show.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. This is the crazy show that we do on Thursdays called What's in the Box?
What's in the box?
Comic culture and sales.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Dan Wickline Show. Today, International Women's Day. We're talking about the two big superhero movies that were led by women last year. We talked about Wonder Woman 1984 before the break, so we're going to dedicate the rest of the show to Black Widow. Now, I do want to mention, Ken does point out that with the multiverse and Flashpoint, there's always a chance that Steve Trevor could come back. They could do just about anything they want after the Flash movie once they do it. So hopefully they will find their guiding star like Kevin Feige is for Marvel and get their stuff together. So, all right, let's talk Black Widow. Now, the first thing that comes to mind with Black Widow is it's a movie that should have been made long before that. It's one of the knocks against the MCU is it did take them so long to do a female-led movie when you had a character like Black Widow who was obviously popular enough that, so they ended up having to do it as a look back and try to squeeze it in between the two Avengers films. This is a character who should have had 2-3 movies that were Bond-level spy thrillers, and that's the one thing, the closest thing that Marvel has had to a spy thriller would be Winter Soldier, and that's kind of that 70s thing, like the 3 Days of the Condor and Running Man and stuff like that. They could have done classic James Bond style movies, spy thrillers, with Scarlett Johansson. They could have done 2 or 3 of them, just like they did with all the other characters. They did, a trio of movies. She could have popped up right after she was introduced in Iron Man 2. There was no reason not to. They could have had Hawkeye as part of it, too. They could have done Hawkeye and Black Widow movies. They could have teamed the two of them up, which would have made a lot of sense. To show what they were doing while the other heroes were doing their things. That's where Marvel dropped the ball. Now talking about the movie that we finally did get, and it's one of the problems with the movie is the fact that we knew where Black Widow had to be, where Natasha Romanoff had to be at the beginning of Endgame. And we knew where she was at the end of Infinity War. So there was your beginning and end points. They had to connect the dots there. But what I liked that they did, and it kind of goes opposite of 1984, the Wonder Woman 1984, is that instead of focusing on some kind of romance or, lost love type of thing, they went and looked at her family. They gave us a very Americans type setup with her growing up in a Russian false family or a sleeper family in Ohio. She had a younger sister and parents, and they changed quite a bit from the character's origins. She was supposed to have been married to the Red Guardian. Now she's the daughter of the Red Guardian in a way. She's not the actual daughter, but she's like raised as during this sleeper cell thing. They brought in the Iron Maiden character. They brought in the second Black Widow, and they made it a family unit. And that was very unique. I actually really liked how they did that. I will tell you, overall, I really liked Black Widow. There were some plot holes, and there's one thing they did that I don't like. But overall, I like the movie. I think Scarlett Johansson nails her role in this. She doesn't suddenly become weak. She doesn't suddenly become emotional or, the tropes that movies have put on women for years, and that they aren't needed. We are all sleepers here. It's the only way to get through winter. I forgot Kyle is in Ohio. So, they didn't do any of those. They didn't weaken the character. They didn't. If anything, she's just as much of a badass, but she's dealing with the fact that the Avengers have split up at that point. That Civil War caused that problem. Yeah. It was definitely hurt by COVID. It would have done better had COVID not happened. I think if it had come out also when people expected it to, instead of being delayed, it probably would have done great. There are some interesting things they choose in there. At one point in the movie, we see her watching Moonraker, a James Bond movie. And again, I think Scarlett Johansson's character could have been used as a Bond-esque type hero for a couple movies. But they put her in there watching Moonraker, and then there is some interesting parallels between Moonraker and Black Widow, including the floating space station compared to the floating Red Room. In Moonraker, there is a fight scene parachuting out of an airplane. You get that type of fight scene here. So there are some parallels, and the fact that she's actually watching Moonraker and quoting the lines means that she has watched it quite a bit. It would have been even funnier had they actually had her watching From Russia with Love, but Moonraker is the one they decided to parallel. Ken, Taskmaster is probably where I think the film failed. And it's kind of ironic. This is, like I said, this is a movie that should have taken place in phase 2. It should have been part of, all of the, it should have been a phase 2 movie during the time where they were doing this type of movie, where the bad guys are two-dimensional and disappointing. It's kind of what Marvel grew out of when they started doing villains like Killmonger and Hela and stuff like that. But back when the villain was basically a carbon copy of the hero, that's where they kind of failed a bit. And, were very unmemorable villains. That's kind of what they did with Taskmaster. He should have been, and it's a he in the movie, or in the comics, he should have been a badass character that they could bring back many times over. And instead, they tie it to Budapest. They tie it to, in a way, they were cleaning up Joss Whedon's mess. There was things that was said in the Avengers that maybe Joss Whedon had in mind for stuff later on. Saying who Sergey, I think the name of somebody's daughter, or talked about what she had done to this guy's daughter, and it kind of forced them into Dreykov's daughter, and they kind of forced that into having to do something about it, and in doing so, that's where they kind of screwed up Taskmaster. And the thing is, I don't know, maybe they did that as an add-on later on. Another thing, the Budapest line was a throwaway that they ended up using. But the movie was filmed with Taskmaster with a male stuntman. So it's not like normally when they do something like that, you can look at a character and go, oh, okay, no, that's a female. This was a guy in a suit of armor doing all the fight scenes, and at the end, they pull the helmet off, and it's a female character. It's Olga Kurylenko from the James Bond movies, oddly enough, from GoldenEye. I think it was GoldenEye. Anyway, no, she was in Quantum of Solace. So that was a weird setup. And maybe they had something else in mind and did a bait and switch because everybody assumed that O.T. Fagbeni was going to be Taskmaster or something like that. And that would have been an interesting betrayal, but they decided to make it Dreykov's daughter. The other big problem is Ray Winstone. Ray Winstone can't play Russian. He can play British thug. That's pretty much his range, British thug. Maybe he's got other British levels that he can play. British high class, British, British cop, British lawyer. Maybe he's got that, but he doesn't have Russian oligarch. It just came across. It's like occasionally he thought, "Oh, I should, put an accent in here," but otherwise he didn't bother. So, to me, the weakness in the movie were the two villains. Dreykov was poorly played as, Ray Winstone's a good actor, but he just couldn't pull off being a Russian oligarch. The second thing is, of course, the Taskmaster switch. They get these great villains that we love for years and years and years, and they toss them away. And it's like, well, no, don't toss them away. Use them. Put them in the Thunderbolts if you're doing that, or use them somewhere else. Don't just toss the character away. But the villains were the big problem. Also, he was creating assassins out of these women. And then you see that scene where he shows basically all the faces of all the Black Widows in the world. And if you count, it's like 7,000. I didn't count. Someone else did the math. But 7,000 Black Widow trained assassins out in the world? Sure, a few of them have gotten killed. But 7,000? That seems like a lot of people that Scarlett Johansson or Natasha Romanoff level out there in the world suddenly with agency, with the ability to make their own choices. That seems like it could go very wrong. That a lot of them might become assassins for hire. And nice money if you can get it, but it just seems like a balance shift in the MCU. Now, that aside, surprisingly, what worked really well for me was the family unit, which going into the movie, I didn't expect. I kind of assumed it would be kind of a joke. You had David Harbour playing Red Guardian. You had Rachel Weisz playing Melina. And Florence Pugh as Melina. Sorry, Rachel Weisz as Melina. Florence Pugh as Elena. And mixing them all together in this, I want to use the term found family, and it's not a found family. It was an assigned family. But they kind of came back together and they found that they were a family. And I think that's what is interesting. And the relationship between Alexei and his two daughters, that he looks at them like daughters, even though he was ready to give them up and go back to, he wants to get his suit and get his shield and go back to being Red Guardian. Melina is probably the one that I think there should have been a twist where she was the big bad or something, because it would have made more sense than just working for the Red Room. I don't know. It just seemed like there was something missing there. She was very disingenuous. And when she did make the turn, it was too convenient. But Red Guardian for me was the breakout of the movie. Absolutely. And the fact that he talks about fighting Captain America at a time when Steve Rogers was specifically in the ice makes you think that there is a story there. So yeah, he would be a great Disney Plus show. And I would love to see them bring in some of the other Soviet super soldiers like Dark Star and Vanguard and Ursa Major. I mean, they do mention Ursa Major as the guy he's arm wrestling with, and there's a Crimson Dynamo reference in the movie. But it would be neat to see them do his story from the time that he fought Captain America, to find out that maybe the government did put another Captain America out there like they did with, John Walker, put a guy in a suit, see what happens. I think that would be interesting. I think that would be a great show. And Harbour played that role so well. Scarlett Johansson it was neat to see her in this version of the character, who she always seemed like she was trying to find a connection, even though she was always on the outside. We saw that a lot in Winter Soldier. She was trying to help Steve, but kept her distance at the same time. And, as she spent more and more time with the Avengers, she got closer. With Hawkeye, she got closer. Then to go back and realize that the family she grew up with was really family to her, that she still felt that feelings, that at least I think she especially felt it for her sister, because they were in the same boat. Maybe she feels them for Alexei. I don't know about Melina, but Yelena. And I didn't love Yelena coming out of that movie. But after seeing her in Hawkeye, I liked the character a lot more, because she was a little, I don't want to say stiff, but I don't know. That one didn't click for me in the movie, where, to me, Alexei and Natasha were the stars of that movie, and I loved it. And I thought a lot of the action was great. The ending was a little over the top with the skydiving fight as the things falling out of the sky. It lost some of the credulity and some of the believability. And you can do that in a Superman movie. You can do that in, a lot of other superhero movies and fantasy movies where you do that. Black Widow's a more grounded, down-to-earth character. is more of a James Bond. So it seemed to go a little over the top. Went a little too much in that final fight scene. Also, I never quite understood why there's a deleted scene that explains it, but they deleted the scene, which is why was she standing around waiting for Ross to show up at the end? And then suddenly we cut to her being free, wearing Yelena's vest with her hair cut short blonde. I know they needed her there and that to go into Endgame, but it just seems like, and then the deleted scene shows her riding off with Thunderbolt Ross, and they've got Antonia, the Taskmaster, and it feels like she's there just to make sure Antonia is going to be taken care of, and then she bails, but then they changed it so Antonia goes off with the Black Widows. So I don't know why she was there to turn herself into Ross in the first place, because she just gets away. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Ken says, Scarlet, good widow, hard to believe she was a second choice. Yeah, that's another thing. But you see that in a lot of these roles. I mean, Hugh Jackman was the second choice for Wolverine, and he wasn't really even that close of a choice. They went to him because Doug Ray Scott had gotten into an accident while filming Mission Impossible 2 and had lost a bunch of weight because of the accident. So he wasn't up for being Wolverine, and they had to go into production. So they went back and got Jackman, who they had passed on because he was too tall and too good looking for Wolverine. But it was desperate time. They got Jackman. Scarlett Johansson came in after Emily Blunt had to step away because of commitments to, I believe it was Gulliver's Travels with Jack Black. There's a lot of times that the second choice, Benedict Cumberbatch was the first choice for Doctor Strange, turned it down, and then they tried to get Joaquin Phoenix, who ended up flirting with the idea, but I think he turned it down, and then they decided to hell with it, we're just going to wait for Benedict. We'll find a time that his schedule works. So, you never know. You cast these things and you never know. Now it would be hard to think of anybody else as Black Widow. And I think that's part of the problem that I have with Yelena is I'm not a legacy character guy. I don't like when they pass the name down, especially when they don't go away. It's like Hawkeye. Clint passing the name down to Kate Bishop, and then he stays active. So now there's two Hawkeyes. That doesn't make any sense to me. Just give her a different name. Let him keep the name Hawkeye. Or give her Hawkeye, let him continue going by Ronin. It doesn't make a lot of sense when they do that. But, so, I really like the Black Widow, but there are some plot issues. Ray Winstone is not a strong villain. Taskmaster being a woman doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I don't know why they decided to take away what his actual powers were, which was the mimic reflexes. Instead they're photographic reflexes. Instead they make him her just computer aided, which doesn't really make her all that special, Ken says Emily Blunt did not have the sex appeal needed for her first appearance in Iron Man, would not have pulled it off. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. She might have been able to, but yeah, I haven't seen her in a role like that. So, Yeah. So overall, of the two movies that we saw, Wonder Woman 1984 was kind of a train wreck. They had their heart was in the right place, but the story just didn't work. Black Widow, I think, was a much better movie. It was hurt by the delays and then trying to come back before people really got back to the theaters. So, Disney Plus release. And where I enjoyed it, I had just come home from vacation, laid down, turned the movie on and watched it. But I think they could have done a better job with the villains in the movie. And they could have rounded the action a little bit better. So another pass over the script to tighten it up may have been good. Throwing out the Wonder Woman 1984 script and starting over would have been the better choice there. So, yeah, I think they did. Scarlett looks pretty and able to kick butt. Yeah, I agree. I think they made the right choice with Scarlett Johansson. I think she's done a wonderful job as Black Widow, and I look forward to seeing what she's doing next because she is doing stuff with Disney. She is producing something for Marvel. We'll have to see how that works out. But, all right, folks. So we covered those two movies for International Women's Day. I don't know how Colin Jost landed Scarlett. Simple. Women like a good sense of humor. Yep, definitely going to be where I leave this. Thank you all for joining. Stick around. Up next is Black Comic Universe with Imani Latif. And then we'll have Minute to Skim It with Jen and Bean. And then I will be back with Kyle as we talk about books in stores this week. Thank you for tuning in. Join me tomorrow where we're going to talk about the second half of the first season of Pennyworth, probably the best DC show that you're not watching. Have a good night. See you tomorrow.